Class. Glad to see everyone here tonight and everyone who's tuning in from afar. If you're standing up, please be seated. Again, we're covering in this particular class right now, we're covering the acceptance unit of the Peaceful Solution, which is the second unit in the junior high. And if you're tuning in for the first time or you'd like to follow along in the book, you can go to, if you're on Facebook, you can go to the top of the page, the official Peaceful Solution page, and there's a little tab there. You'll see the character unit, but there's a little tab next to it. If you'll just click on that, you'll see the acceptance unit in the drop-down menu. Just click on there, and we're going to pick up where Chris left off last time on page 28. If everybody would open their books to page 28. Of course, you know, we always like to, I'll get our bearings by going to page 28, but then we're going to go back here and we're going to do a little review, which is really necessary. It's been a few days. Remember, we're talking about intolerance. And tonight the topic will be about how intolerance leads to conflicts. But before we go there, let's take a little journey back to page 3 of the acceptance unit here, just to refresh our mind about a little something about acceptance. Acceptance, at the very first paragraph there, as presented in this unit of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, means to willingly acknowledge the positive characteristics about yourself and others. Key point right there, and I'm hoping you already circled it, is positive characteristics, right? Positive characteristics about other people, not the negative characteristics. We don't want to promote those kind of things. We don't want to look up to or think that's something that we should acknowledge as something positive. Remember, if it's positive, it promotes moral values. It promotes values that don't bring harm to yourself, others, or the environment. So remember, willingly acknowledging the positive characteristics about yourself and others. Acceptance means understanding that there are aspects of our life that we can and cannot change. Okay? Having said that, now let's go to page 164 in the book here in the glossary, because I want to look up this word intolerance. Intolerance, on page 164, it says, unwilling to accept those who are different from you. Now get this. Here's a real eye-opener. Everyone's different than you. Look around you. Is there anybody here that's a carbon copy? No. So everyone's different than us, right? No matter what color you are, everyone's different than you. Okay? Nobody's the same. So that's the definition of intolerance, is unwilling to accept those who are different than you. Pretty soon, hopefully, what we're gonna end up learning how to do is to start being colorblind when it comes to people. Okay? It's really should not even be an issue in our mind. You know, not that we can't recognize that we have different shades or whatever, but when I mean colorblind, I mean we shouldn't be thinking somebody's lower than us or weird because they don't look like us, the same hair texture or skin shade, right? So now let's go to page 25, because I want to look at intolerance. Let's see. Page 25. Let's see. Okay. Because I want to see where intolerance actually begins. Where it actually begins. And then I'll take it even further back to where it actually begins. Okay? But in the second paragraph here where it says intolerance hurts, it says, an intolerant attitude starts when one judges others unworthy to live in peace and security because of superficial differences such as the color of their skin, their culture, or their beliefs. Now, I want you to circle a 3-letter word in that first sentence. One. 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 Numero uno. Right? It says an intolerant attitude starts when one judges others unworthy. Do you realize that all of this division, one person can start it? One person. One person can have an idea, a thought in their mind, because that's where everything starts, is in your thoughts, right? One person who doesn't follow the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program or hasn't been taught, in fairness to them, they get these ideas. They have these thoughts about other people. Different, people of different backgrounds, different religions, different skin shade, whatever it might be. And they start to form what's called an opinion. And as you know, I'm sure you've heard, opinions are like eyeballs, right? And everybody has at least one or two, right? All right? But is an opinion a fact? Yes or no? No, it's not a fact. It's an opinion. It's somebody's idea or somebody's ideology, okay? Doesn't make it right. It just means that one person believes that, but that one person can start a fire. Because that one person can share with somebody else their negative idea about other people. And then from there, it can become a forest fire, because that other person spreads it to somebody else. Hey, did you hear this about those people? Hey, did you hear this? And pretty soon, you know how the gossip mill goes. Pretty soon, the whole world knows about it. I'm always amazed, think about how fast words travel. Ideas travel across the earth. And now with Facebook, and this was before Facebook or MySpace or Twitter or any of these social media sites were even put up, or even, before the internet even came along. I remember hearing sayings, going to school, I would hear certain sayings, and it was like, I thought we were the only ones that heard that saying, and then I would turn on the TV, and there'd be other people talking about the same thing, and I'm like, how did they learn about that so quick? I'm up here in Alaska, and they're talking about it in California. Well, that's probably where it originated, in California or New York or one of them places, and then it just spread out from there, right? But ideas spread very quickly. So one person can judge somebody unworthy to live in peace, safety, and security because of their differences. Now I want you to go to I'm sure most of you might have brought your character unit. We're going to be referring back to that on page 8 right now. And often we will refer back to it because it is the foundation of this whole program. Remember what it says right here, and I want you to mark page 8 character next to when one judges unworthy for anyone to live in peace and security, because remember, intolerance doesn't start with intolerance. It starts with lack of moral training. Okay? Because it says right here on page 8 of the character unit, in the second paragraph below what morality is divided into 3 categories, it says, moral principles in regard to human life means acknowledging and accepting that life is valuable and all people have the potential to contribute to society. All people. Get that? Doesn't say anything about skin shade, religion, gender, etc. When you have a moral attitude toward others, you accept and appreciate that they have the right to live in peace, safety, and security. Right? And we just learned an intolerant attitude starts when somebody thinks that they don't have that right to live in peace, safety, and security. But you know what? They may not know. They might not even know they have that right. Think about it. If you grew up in a culture where hatred was taught constantly to you, and there are cultures that teach hatred constantly to children, hatred for other religions or other ethnic groups, they teach them from a very young age to hate certain groups. So if you're brought up in that hatred for other people, then you're going to hate other people. You're not even going to know why you hate them. You're just hating them because you were told to hate them. Okay? So you might not have ever had the opportunity to learn anything else other than what some children are taught about Jewish children, or what some Jewish children are taught about Palestinian children, or what some tribal group in Africa is taught about another tribal group in Africa, so on, so forth. Okay? It goes on and on. It's everywhere. It's even here in America, you know, different neighborhoods can hate one another. The south side hates the east side. The west side hates the north side. Well, why? Well, because you live on the north side. And, you know, I heard the north side is a bunch of rich people, and everyone that lives in the south is a bunch of poor people. Ghetto people, so to speak. And hatred is created. These barriers are put up. These imaginations that come out of people's brains are spread to other people, and people start to believe it. And really, if you think about it, we can even go back a little further. Let's go look at page 24 of the acceptance unit. Let's go to page 24. There's an equation of hate. I was talking to somebody the other day, I got to tell you this, about we were in a store, and I asked a person, a colored person, a person that's a different color than me. I was buying some Aunt Jemima, it might be one of the last ones on the shelf, cornbread mix. And I asked that person, did that ever offend you that they called this Aunt Jemima? And he said, no. No, well, why would it? I mean, Aunt Jemima, what's that? You know, it's just the name of a person. Well, it's been put in everyone's mind now that that's somehow it's some kind of racial thing, and we have to take them all out of the stores and rename it something. And we got to talking about that, and I started sensing that the person became a little bit agitated about when we were talking about racial inequality or race in general. And I told the person, I said, you know, because he said he was brought up with a lot of racial prejudice in his community. So I could understand why he got agitated about the subject. But after we talked for a while, I told him, I said, you know, is it really racism? Because really, that's just a word. We're going to learn here in the next shortly, there's only one race. It's called the human race. So is it really racism that you don't like? Or is it hatred that you disagree with? Because really it all stems from hatred and lack of education. It has nothing to do with race, because they haven't been educated that, hey, hello, there's only one race. It's called the human race. We're all one species. Mankind is one species. Just like you have dogs and cats, they're a different species. They come in all shapes and sizes. Cats come from tigers or lions all the way down to a little, a tabby cat, right? All right? They're all one species. Different shapes, different colors and sizes, but they're all one species. Same with dogs. They're a species. They have different colors. Some of them are mixed. Some of them are very large dogs. Some of them are very small dogs. Some of them are wild dogs, live out in the woods. They're called wolves, right? Why is it that human beings, who are supposed to be the most intelligent species on the planet, right? We're all fixated on the color of our fur, right? Do animals worry about that? Are they all fighting because are tabby cats fighting with black cats because of their color of their fur? No. So why do we? We possibly could learn something from the animals. What do you think, They're not intolerant in that way. We need to grow up is what we need to do. We need to grow up, we need to get educated, and really that's where this comes from, is this hate. Look at the equation of hate. It says intolerance, which means unwilling to accept any person and unwilling to help them overcome things that are not beneficial. And as a peaceful solution instructor, you better be ready for anything. Okay? And I mean anything. Because I've had everything come my way that you could possibly think of. And you know what? I've had students that live lifestyles that I totally disagree with. But you know what? I want to teach them. We got to teach them. We want to teach them because, okay, here's the alternative. We can teach peace, which we do in the Peaceful Solution, or we can go to their house with a picket sign and tell them how much we hate what they're doing and how what a worthless human being they are for doing it, right? That's going to help? Is that going to create peace? Burning crosses on people's lawn, that will bring peace? I knew from a very young age there was something wrong with this kind of stuff, and I'm really glad that my parents, and we'll talk a little bit about some of what my parents had me watch when I was young to make sure that that kind of idea never came across my mind about people in general. So intolerance plus inconsiderate, which means displaying a lack of thoughtful concern for others. Like, how would I feel if I was in that person's shoes? If I was being ridiculed because of my religion, my ethnicity, my skin color. So intolerance plus inconsiderate plus racism, which is the mistreatment of a group of people due to nationality and ethnicity. Remember, racism is a word that came along because people are ignorant of genetics, okay? They're ignorant of genetics. They don't know yet. When I say ignorant, I'm not putting them down. Ignorant means uneducated. They have not yet learned about genetics and how similar we actually are, okay? Which we're going to learn here because the Peaceful Solution, we educate people. Plus discrimination, which means treatment or consideration based on class or category rather than individual merit, partiality, or prejudice. I always love what Dr. Martin Luther King said when he said about skin color. He said it'll be a great day in America when people aren't judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That man was ahead of his time. Okay? Quit judging people. He said, why are we judging people on their outer appearance, which is their personality, right? Why aren't we making decisions based on how they behave toward others and themselves? That should be the number one thing. Not looking at somebody's differences in appearance. That just makes life interesting. So, equals hate. So intolerance, inconsiderate, plus racism, plus discrimination equals hate, which is an intense hostility and extreme dislike. Okay? And that's, it's like what Chris was saying the other night. I agree with him completely when he talked about hate crimes. It's always baffled me when they call things a hate crime, because I'm telling you right now, when I was a criminal and I was involved in criminal activity, when I was selling drugs to my neighbors and when I was breaking my neighbor's door in to steal their TV, I wasn't exactly loving them, was I? Was I loving them when I broke into their house and I stole the things that they worked hard for? Or was I actually hating my neighbor? So I'm not sure where we get this idea of what's called a hate crime. I think it's all hatred. It's all hatred because it injures people. These words, it says, are part of our vocabulary because of lack of acceptance. And you can write down next to it a lack of education, right? And let's go back to the character unit one more time. I promise we'll be moving forward here in just a couple of minutes. I just want to get these ideas in your mind before we advance. Look on page 14 of the character unit where it talks about the positive character traits. And the very top one is educated. Getting all the facts, getting all the true facts. Remember, making sure the facts are true, not false facts, because there are false facts. Go to any courtroom, you'll find out. Both sides are given their facts, but both sides can't be telling the truth in every case, right? So getting all the true facts and making sure they're correct before you make a decision. For example, your friend tells you that all white people like to rule the world. Well, you'd already been researching that, and you found out that no, not all white people want to rule the world. Okay? These are these things that are put in our head that are just totally like, they're generalizations, okay, is what they call them. Just generalizations. Like Chris was saying the other night, all blondes are dumb. All colored people like to play basketball. I've met some that don't play basketball at all. Okay? So these generalizations about people, that's people's ideas. Okay? All right, so now let's go to page, let's see, back into the page 27 of the acceptance unit where it says sticks and stones. I want to talk about that. Sticks and stones, I remember when we were young, we said that all the time when we were in grade school. When somebody would call us a name or do something to us like that, we would always say, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. You know why we said that? We were taught to say that. Somebody else said it, and we learned it, and we said it. So tell somebody that, somebody can say sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And then you call them a name, and they're like, what'd you say? Right? They're ready to fight. But they just said sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. But you call them a name, or you call their mama a name, or their daddy a name, or something like that, and boy, they're up in arms. They're ready to go. Right? So it was a great idea, to try not to retaliate, thinking that way, like, all right, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. But the truth is, name calling does hurt. And insults hurt people a lot. Words hurt worse than sticks and stones sometimes. And they damage people's mind and their heart. Okay? So where a black eye will heal and will go away eventually, words, they stick. Okay? So these little sayings, that's a myth. It's a rhyme used as a defense against name-calling and verbal bullying to try to avoid retaliation, but it's not true. It doesn't teach a child the truth regarding name-calling and how it hurts and how it can really do damage to people. Didn't you hear the other speakers, the other teachers talking about children that hung themselves because they were constantly harassed and bullied? It was just words, right? It was only words people used. That's not a big deal, is it? It's just words. Yeah, but those words led to those children getting tired of being tormented, and they didn't know what else to do. You know what? Not all of them killed themselves. Some of them took a gun to school. Some of them took out their anger and their frustrations and their embarrassment that turned to anger. Right? Remember, anger is a secondary emotion, but it turned to anger, and then it turned to rage when they went to school with that gun. And then innocent people even got caught in the crossfire. So just remember, words do hurt. Okay? Let's go to LP2D, back in the lesson plan here. Let's get going. We'll go forward here. LP2D, and we're going to look at number 4. But we're going to read the bottom part because Chris already covered the top. It says, inform students that intolerance has dotted the world's history with conflicts, wars, and the murders of countless men, women, and children. Have students turn to page 28 in their handbooks and read the section entitled, Intolerance Leads to Conflicts. So let's go ahead and turn to page 28. Okay. So intolerance leads to conflicts, and it has some definitions here we're going to go over here. It says conflict, the definition of conflict is fight, battle, and war. And I looked up that word conflict because I wanted to see the etymology of the word, where it came from. And it's a Latin word, comes from a Latin word. It means struck together or to clash. To strike together or to clash. It's like you have a conflict, you know, your wardrobe clashes. You're wearing a certain shirt with a certain pair of pants and it don't look right. There's a conflict. It's clashing. It's not working, right? Girls know what I'm talking about. I know you guys don't. We don't care. We just throw on whatever, right? The word war means declared armed fighting between states or nations. Declared armed fighting between states or nations, and value here means to consider as important or worthy. Okay? So it says intolerance is not a new concept. For thousands of years, intolerance, racism, and stereotyping have caused hatred, violence, and wars. Now, that word stereotyping, I'm not sure how many people know what stereotyping means, so I'm going to go ahead and try to explain it in a real simple way. The word stereo doesn't have anything to do with, you know, two speakers and a record player or something. It's talking about something firm or solid. It means firm or solid. And it's like stereotyping is like you have a firm, solid idea about something and you never change, you never change your thinking about it. It's kind of like a cookie cutter idea of people. Everybody's the same, you know. If they're Asian people, they all likely eat rice, like Chris was saying the other night. But then you talk to an Asian person, and that Asian person says, you know what, that's not true, I don't even like rice. Right? So stereotyping is like this cookie cutter mentality about people, that they're all the same, regardless of whatever religion they belong to or whatever skin color they are, that they all do the same thing, they all like the same thing, they all behave the same way, etc. Okay, that's stereotyping. So, it says, an unwillingness to accept diversity, which means differences, has resulted in the loss of countless lives of men, women, and children. Read your history books, newspapers, and watch the world news. You will clearly see the conflicts that were brought about because of intolerance. And we're going to go over here some examples of the effects of intolerance throughout our history. And you know, it only lists 3 here, but I'm sure, you know, if you go back in the recesses of your brain, all the things that you've seen in your short period of time on this earth, I'm sure you can think of a lot more. Because it seems like the history of mankind is just a history of fighting and strife and war. I'm always amazed, you know, when I see these wars being fought in these different countries, and I see a couple of Jeeps or what are they called, Toyotas out in the middle of a desert, right? Probably not a gas station within 100 miles, you know. But yet these guys are out there, they got rockets, they got guns, they got ammunition, and I'm like, where are they getting this stuff? Is this all they do? Well, you know, a lot of those guys that do that, they're all a lot of them are mercenaries. They're being paid. They don't care who they work for or who they kill as long as you give them a paycheck. Okay? And that's a fact. They don't care who they fight for as long as they can earn a living and they can feed their family, because they believe that that's the only way they can get money. That's a lot of people that fight wars. They actually believe that. We're here to teach them something different. So let's talk about the Holocaust here. By the way, that word Holocaust, it means a burnt offering. It means a burnt sacrifice. It means like an extremely massive killing. Okay? And it says the Holocaust of World War II represents a time period of intense hatred, prejudice, and discrimination that resulted in the deaths of approximately 9 million men, women, and children. And those numbers, I think they've said, I've seen estimates as high as 11 million, and some even higher. I don't think they really even can really possibly know an accurate number. I think it was probably a lot more than this. But nonetheless, even if it was only 6 million or 9 million, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of death. 6 million of these people exterminated were Jews or Hebrew people. The other 3 million consisted of gypsies, blacks, handicapped, or mentally retarded, or mentally ill. 9 million people died because of intolerance. Remember, because somebody judged, somebody's idea was that these people were not worthy of respect, the right to live in peace, safety, and security. And I'm going to give you a little history about Adolf Hitler. Now, I want you to understand something about Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler, contrary to popular opinion, I think Joseph Stalin of Russia killed more people than Hitler did. I think he killed 20 million of his own people. Okay? So Hitler wasn't by any means, he didn't have the most killings under his belt by any means. It's just one that affected a certain group of people that it's been retold, the story, and we have Holocaust museums all over the world actually that show what took place in Europe back in World War II, or before World War II started. And we're going to talk about how this all came down. But it was the Holocaust in Hitler's mind. They didn't call it the Holocaust. The Germans, the SS officers and the rulers, they called it the final solution to the Jewish problem. They called it the final solution because they weren't taught the peaceful solution, you see. So they thought it was the final solution to eradicate their enemies. And the author of the Peaceful Solution has said in one of the forewords in fact, it's in the foreword of the high school unit, that Adolf Hitler would not have killed 6 million Jews had he been taught the Peaceful Solution character education program. He wouldn't have done it. Okay? None of these men that were involved in the Holocaust or any of these other dastardly deeds that were done against humanity, none of them would have done these things if they'd been taught what you're learning today. And they would have been given, if they'd have been educated in the facts about morality, what morals actually are. Because I want you to think of something right now. When you go back and you read the history of the United States, and you think of the founding fathers of the United States, they were real big on morals and ethics. You know that, right? In fact, the early writings of Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and all those forefathers of the United States that helped form the government, they were really big on character and they were really big on moral values. Okay? But you know what? Most of them were warriors. Most of them were war generals. They fought in battles. They actually killed people. But you know why they killed people? Because they were taught it was okay. Somebody told them that somebody can only push you so far, and that's it. They weren't taught the peaceful solution that tells you nobody can ever push you too far. Retaliation is never an option. Because if you retaliate, what is retaliation going to lead to? More retaliation, right? They weren't taught that. These men weren't taught that. Okay? So they only did what they thought was right. What they were taught was morality. But we're learning in the Peaceful Solution that moral means never to bring harm to anyone. Right? To anyone. To always value all life. You're not valuing life if you're taking life, right? So they weren't taught that. So in fairness to Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin and the rest of them, they weren't taught the peaceful solution. So they thought they had the final solution to the Jewish problem. And Hitler, they believed in the Aryan race, this Aryan race, which really was the term Aryan was actually originally had to do with languages and dialects in Europe. It had nothing to do with a race of people. It had zero to do with it. It was only about the study of the different dialects in Europe, the different languages. Somebody took that idea. Remember what I said about one person? One person took that term Aryan and they turned it into some kind of something that it wasn't. And they turned it into a race of people. And that's what occurred with the Nazi party. The Aryan race versus everyone else. You know? And any race that wasn't expanding, they thought, was doomed to be destroyed. Okay? And, you know, that's where they got this idea of a greater Germany. And the dynamic of constant growth, expansion, conquest, and destruction of others, that's what this notion was all about. They thought that, look, if we're going to survive as a race, as Aryans, as pure Germans, then what we've got to do is we've got to get rid of everybody that's not a pure Aryan. We got to get rid of them. We got to expand. We got to go out and we got to conquer all of our enemies. We got to kill everyone that's not like us, whether they're black, whether they're Jewish, whether they're mentally ill, whether they're gypsies. If they're not pure, if they're not Aryan, and you know, back in Nazi Germany, you had to prove you were of Aryan descent or pure German descent, and you had to go back in your records to 1800 to prove it. So, you know, being a person in the genealogical business was a big business back then, because everybody had to come and get proof that they were pure German. And if you were an SS officer, you had to go all the way back to 1750, the year 1750, to show your lineage as a pure Aryan or pure German race, so to speak. Remember, this is their idea they came up with. So, they believed in their mind. Remember, I'm trying to give you their mindset. Their mindset was there's two competing groups, Aryans and everyone else. So they're competing for space and land. So they say, okay, we got to go and we got to take over this country over here because we need more land to raise our Aryan children, right? So we can go out and we can conquer some more people, right? It's kind of like the greedy farmer I heard about. You know the greedy farmer? You heard that one where the greedy farmer, he says, oh, no, I don't want everybody's. I just want my next door neighbor's farm, right? Okay, so then when he gets his next door neighbor's farm, doesn't he have another next door neighbor? That just goes on and on. They never get enough. So they're competing for space and land, and they needed food to grow for their children so they could raise more children, so they could raise more warriors to conquer all their enemies. That was their idea. That was the idea behind this. Okay, so the original word, I told you, the word Aryan, the original definition was just based on the study of language structure. And the strong and racially pure Aryans had to be encouraged to have more children, and everyone else needed to be sterilized or neutralized somehow, you know? They needed to be getting rid of. So they began sterilization programs. They began putting Jewish, Hebrew people in ghettos to isolate them, neighborhoods, you know, areas, isolating them from everyone else. They started changing laws. This went on for a few years, you know, till they finally ended up with this final solution of exterminating these people. And as you know, you probably read and you've probably been to a Holocaust museum where you've seen, you know, that they came up with all kinds of ideas to kill people. And it was very, very extremely heartbreaking to see that people could actually be duped into this. But you know what? If you're taught hatred, you got to remember, in Nazi Germany, the people that were involved in this was basically the whole country was involved in one way or another. Not everyone that lived in the country was involved. Some people like Oskar Schindler, I'm sure you've seen the movie Schindler's List, he tried to save as many as he could. Okay, he was, I believe he made pots and pans and things like that. He had a factory, and he would try to save as many Jewish people as he could from going to these concentration camps. But he was only one man. There was others, too, that were trying to save people. But as a society, everyone was attacking the Jews, and the Jews were just destined for death. And they set up concentration camps in Poland and other places where they put them on trains, and they took them and they systematically murdered these people. So that's the Holocaust. Think about that had to be some intense hatred. But you know what? They were taught this hatred. They were taught it. Let's talk about the civil rights movement. This is something I can relate to because I was growing up in that time in the 60s. I was born in 1962, so there were certain things that I do remember. Okay, so it says 100 years after the Civil War, blacks were still struggling to be accepted as equals in American society. Their world consisted of discrimination, segregation, and racial inequality. Segregation, I got a picture. I got some pictures, if I can show a couple of them. Let's see. These are bathrooms. Okay, right, I think. Can you all see that? Can you see it okay? Okay. Those are bathrooms. This is back in the 50s. You see the one bathroom. This one here, it says colored only, and this one says white people only, and you see the colored gentleman coming out of it? That's because some colored gentlemen started having what they called civil disobedience. They started protesting against their treatment in America. This was here in America, okay? This wasn't somewhere else, okay? This was right here, and this was back in the 50s and 60s and before that. Let me show you another person here. You might have heard of this lady here. Her name is Rosa Parks. In Mobile, Alabama. She started the Mobile, Alabama bus boycott. She was sitting on a bus in the colored only section, and they told her to move because the whites only section was full and they needed to put a white person in her seat. And she refused to get up. Well, because of that refusal to get up, she was arrested, charged with something. Her case went all the way to the U.S., or actually went, I don't remember how far it went, but yeah, her case went to the Supreme Court. And as a result, you see her sitting on that bus with the white gentleman there? Desegregation of buses or segregation of buses was no longer allowed. In other words, blacks and whites could ride on the same bus. Because it wasn't just her. There was others that stood up against this hatred. And they said, this isn't fair. We're all Americans. We should be able to, enjoy going into a diner like these men here. These guys here are known as the, let's see, I can't remember. Yeah, the Greensboro 4. Let me show you these guys. These guys, these four colored gentlemen, are protesting. They went into a Woolworth's in Greensboro, North Carolina, where it's white-only diner, and they said, "No, we're gonna eat. We want to eat. We're hungry too." And here's the thing. You know what they told the person that was serving the food? They asked to be served some food, and the person said, "Well, we don't serve colored people here. This is white only." And they said, "What do you mean you don't serve colored people?" They showed the receipts. They showed their receipts from shopping in Woolworths. They said, "You've been serving us. We've been buying stuff in the store. So why can't you serve us here in the diner?" Right? Well, those guys right there became pretty famous guys because of their refusal to go along with this hatred that was being shown right here in America. Let's see. I was going to tell you about Muhammad Ali. That was another thing. Muhammad Ali. I was watching an interview, Muhammad Ali. You guys know Muhammad Ali, okay? But this is before he was Muhammad Ali. He was Cassius Clay. And I used to really like him because I really loved his sense of humor, and he was just really a down-to-earth kind of guy, even though he was very famous. And he was also an activist. You know, he too faced racial discrimination his whole life. Even though he had won a gold medal, he still couldn't go, an Olympic gold medal in Rome, he still could not go in to a diner as a colored person and sit down and be served. They would tell him, no, you can't eat here. You're a Negro. That's what they called him back then. You're a Negro. You can't eat here. So I'm watching this interview, and he's telling this story, and he's telling it just as calmly and coolly. And I thought, man, this guy is really something else. But he said he walked into a diner, and this is after he got back from winning his gold medal in Rome. And he asked for a cup of coffee and a hot dog. And the waitress looked at him and said, we don't serve Negroes. And he said, I was so mad. This is what he said. He said, I was so mad. I said, I don't eat them either. You get it? She said, we don't serve Negroes. He says, I don't eat them either. Just give me a cup of coffee and a hamburger then. I thought, you know what? That was probably one of the greatest comebacks ever. We don't serve Negroes. I don't eat them either, so just give me a cup of coffee and a hamburger then. Did you know that man also, he really did believe in this. He stuck to his story about not liking this racial discrimination, because it wasn't just what whites were doing to blacks at that time. If you remember, he refused to be drafted into the Vietnam War. In 1967, there was a war going on, the Vietnam conflict, and the Vietnam War, and he refused to sign up. And his statement was, quote, I ain't got no quarrel with those Viet Cong. I don't have no problem with them. Well, they took that as meaning, oh yeah, he doesn't have a problem with them, but he'd probably go fight against somebody else. No, he had a firmly held belief from before that war was wrong in any shape, any way, shape, or form. He had a firmly held belief that war should not be fought at all. Okay, and I believe he belonged to Nation of Islam. He was following some groups before this time when he was asked to join up, and they had a firmly held belief that that's not right. We shouldn't be doing that. They didn't know that he had that firmly held belief until a little later, but he refused to sign up for the war in 1967 to go to Vietnam. You know what they gave him for his refusal? 5 years in prison, a $10,000 fine, and banned from boxing for 3 years. Now, he remained out on bond during that appeal process. He never went to prison, but he was facing prison. This is how firmly this man believed that we should not be killing each other, okay? He wasn't going to go do that. He said, I have no quarrel with them. Well, his case finally made it up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the only reason it did is because while in between the time that he refused to sign up in 1967 to about 1971 when his case was heard by the U.S. Supreme Court, he was winning some championships. And he became very famous, very famous. So now the Supreme Court was like, man, if we don't hear this case, they're going to wonder why we don't hear the case of Muhammad Ali. He's a famous guy. So they were kind of forced to have to hear his case. And here's probably something you didn't know about that case. He won his case. He won the case. He never went to prison. But the only reason he won, there was a 3-3 tie with the justices in the Supreme Court. And you can go and read for yourself. I'm not going to tell you about it, but you can go and read about how a clerk in the U.S. Supreme Court clued a judge in on something about him, and that's how he won his case. He originally lost his case 5-3. He originally lost it, but before they made the opinion or the ruling, something took place in the court. A court clerk told another judge about this case, and it was switched. Okay? And then what they found out was, hey, Muhammad Ali, he's always not believed in war. It's not just that he didn't want to sign up to go kill Vietnamese people. He doesn't believe in killing anybody. That's just a little something you can use. But that's what was going on in the civil rights movement. Then you had, you know, my parents, I remember in 1974, there was a movie that came out. It was called The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was a fictional movie. I thought it was true. I didn't know until recently that it was actually a fiction, but my parents told me I needed to watch that movie. It was a made-for-TV movie. It was on CBS. And but it was about a lady that lived in the Civil War time, but lived to be like 110, and she lived up to the Civil Rights movement. And she told her story. And I'm going to tell you, that was probably one of the most moving movies I ever saw in my life. And it really made a huge impression on me about the plight of colored people and what they went through in America. And I'll never forget that movie. I'll never forget it. It was before the movie Roots came out. Roots came out like 3 years later, but the Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman was probably one of the most memorable movies that in my life, because of what they went through, the way she described the things all from the Civil War. I think she lived in Louisiana, but all up through the Civil War and all through the Civil Rights movement. All, you know, she's like 110 years old in the movie. But it was a very excellent movie, you know, showing the things that they went through. And I think everybody should be educated about these things, you know, and they should be taught, you know, this empathy for others, you know. And I'm glad my parents had me watch that movie for whatever reason they did. Now then, finally, we have the September 11th, 2001 incident. Actually, you know what? Let me read the rest of this. I'm sorry. The Civil Rights Movement, it says, 100 years after the Civil War, blacks were still struggling to be accepted as equals in American society. Their world consisted of discrimination, segregation, and racial inequality. The Civil Rights Movement was a time in history when black Americans counteracted laws of segregation and discrimination with nonviolent demonstrations, boycotts, and marches. Key, nonviolent. You know, they didn't bring harm to anybody by doing it, okay? In a short period of time, over the 1950s and 60s, the Civil Rights Movement put an end to racial discrimination by the law. But it also put an end to people's lives, like Martin Luther King. Okay? Just like Mahatma Gandhi, remember? Gandhi was all about peace. He never raised a fist or any weapons against anybody. And he preached nonviolence. He was totally against violence. Okay? Well, Martin Luther King was the same way. But Martin Luther King was murdered. So you see that just because you promote these moral values, okay, that doesn't mean everyone's going to love you. That doesn't mean everyone's going to agree with you, because there's always going to be somebody out there. Remember that one person? That one person? It can just be one person. It's all it takes is that one person with some weird idea that was planted in their brain by somebody else, or it just came out of the 13th chapter of their own imagination, right? That certain people are a certain way because they're a certain color or a certain religion, right? So September 11, 2001, I see a lot of young people here, so they weren't alive. We'll read about it here. It says, this has been called the most tragic day in American history. It was the day that terrorists hijacked 4 commercial passenger planes and flew them into World Trade Center, Twin Towers, and the Pentagon. You know, a lot of times when we think about 9/11, we tend to think of just the Twin Towers and Building 7, but we don't really think about Pennsylvania. We don't think about, the Pentagon and the other places that were involved. It says, the 4th plane crashed 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Thousands of lives were destroyed that day. Notice they were destroyed. These lives were destroyed. Destroyed. You know, why? You know, what for? Because of someone's ideas. You know, someone started an idea about people. And actually, some people believe these ideas so much, you know, they're willing to strap bombs on themselves and walk into a restaurant or walk into a shopping place in like some of these Middle Eastern countries. You know, they'll walk into an area where they're selling food and there's lots of people gathered, and they'll have a And sometimes it's children that are sent in to do it. And they'll blow themselves up, these suicide bombings. They'll blow themselves up just to kill their enemies. Now, do you think a child that has a suicide belt on that walks in to kill a bunch of people, do you think they've ever had an opportunity to be taught moral character? It's obvious that they've been taught hatred, okay? If the adults are putting them up to doing these things. Okay, it says, those who died in the attack left behind loved ones who had to deal with the loss of parents, husbands, wives, and children. And not just that. After the 9/11 attack, we had troops that were sent into Afghanistan and Iraq and other places. And their parents, their families had to deal with the loss of their loved ones because of war, retaliation. It's heartbreaking to watch. I've seen some documentaries about the 9/11 event, and to see, they had all these pictures, when there was a lot of people who were missing for a long time because they hadn't found their bodies. Some of the bodies were actually never recovered. Okay? And they had pictures of their missing loved ones, and they were just crying, and, I don't know that you can imagine the pain and the agony that people were going through, just wondering, what if their loved one was still alive. And the horror that they felt, you have to put yourself on that day. Go back to that day, If you were there, if you got to see some of the up-close things, you were watching people jumping out of those buildings. They were so hot. The fires were so hot, there was people jumping out of the windows. They couldn't take it, the heat. They would rather die jumping out of a window than being burned to death. Think about the horror. I heard some of the phone calls that were made, the 9/11 phone calls. Yes, sir, we're going to get the fire department's on their way up. And he's like, I'm burning up. And you could hear the horror in him. And the lady, all she could do was just try to calm him down and tell him that the fire department was on their way, knowing that this man was getting ready to die. Okay, it was horrible. Horrible to hear these things. It's horrible. And if you have a heart, if you have any kind of heart, you would make you cry. You would feel like you were there yourself, and that was your own loved one. And we should feel that way. We should empathize with people that are in these situations. So it says, racially singling out those who are Arab or Muslim and blaming them for this tragedy is yet one more example of the danger of stereotyping and intolerance. Remember, after 9/11, that's exactly what they did. They started blaming all the Muslims and blaming all the Arabs for this. If you were an Arab, you were under suspicion. If you wore a hijab, you were under suspicion. You must be up to something. You probably got a bomb underneath your dress if you're a woman. That's the way people were thinking. Blaming an entire nation or religion for the actions of a few will not bring back those who died on September 11th, will it? And how's that retaliation working out for us? How's that $11 trillion we've spent in these wars working out? They just pulled out of Afghanistan. I think they just pulled out of a bunch of troops out of Afghanistan finally, and they're like, the country's taken over by the Taliban again, the very people that they went to war against. So how did that work out? Retaliation worked out? No. We could have took that $11 trillion and used it dropping peaceful solution book bombs all over the country, Here, have some books. Read these books. Read these books. Get these ideas in your head, Get these moral values so you can stop thinking that you all need to kill each other. You don't need to kill one another. You can make friends out of enemies with the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, and I've seen it done time and time and again. It's been done, and it will continue to be done if we keep making that effort, everyone. And you're making that effort now by coming and learning and sharing this information with your friends and family. And by becoming teachers, you're going to be able to spread this. We're going to be able to get this out everywhere to everyone. So we're going to stop there. We're done with, again, these represent only a small portion of the countless lives that have been wasted through hatred and ignorance. But, that's all we have time for tonight. And we'll pick up on page 29 next time. And I think the next class will be on 7:25. Sunday, 7:25, I believe is the date, at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. Okay, so thank you very much, and everybody have a great evening.